So the all-military approach and the all-appeasement approach hasn't worked. Now the Pakistani government is now in a kind of new phase, and obviously we have a democratically elected Pakistani government. We have the AMP in the northwest frontier, which I think is very significant. Perhaps Nick will probably talk about that in more detail, because with the MMA gone, you've got a Pashtun group that isn't sort of religious in nature, which I think has a lot more credibility on these issues. But it seems to me that the Fatah problem for Pakistan is one of these problems which is very, very difficult to solve, not amenable. I mean, the literacy rate for females in the Fatah is 2 or 3%. So if you look at the problem that we have in southern Afghanistan, I think the problem is Fatah in terms of getting a handle on all the various economic issues and is enormously difficult. So the question is, what should that policy be? And I can't really tell you right now, because I think that's such a complicated question. Clearly the United States has a policy. Part of it is to arm the Frontier Corps and give them money. And you see from Jane Perlez's piece in the New York Times 2 days ago that this attack on the that killed the 11 Pakistani paramilitary soldiers has basically maybe that program is perhaps in serious jeopardy. There's also $750 million the United States is going to put into the Fatah, and over the next 5 years the Pakistani government is going to put in even more money. But just throwing money at the problem is probably, I think we've seen that it doesn't necessarily yield very many results. And I think one problem the Pakistanis suffer from is that despite I've raised this issue with my senior Pakistani military official, the Pakistani military doesn't appear to have a counterinsurgency doctrine. And he said, well, we do, but I don't see much evidence of that. And it took several years for the United States to really get its own counterinsurgency doctrine back that we'd forgotten about. And this is something, the Pakistani military set up for a land war with India, not a counterinsurgency problem on its western border. And so that seems to be part of the problem and part of the solution going forward. On the negotiations, these striking numbers, about 50% of Pakistanis would negotiate with the Pakistani Taliban, the Afghan Taliban, and Al-Qaeda. That is a pretty striking number. But when we look at these numbers, I think it's important to remember that we have a policy of negotiation. The United States effectively has a policy of negotiation, or the Afghan government has a policy of negotiating with the Afghan Taliban in Afghanistan. So if it's good enough on one side of the border, why isn't it good enough on the other side of the border? In fact, one of the most successful things that we've done in Afghanistan is the amnesty program that we have for the Afghan Taliban. Thousands of people have taken advantage of this. I've seen how this goes down, somebody's released from Bagram Air Force Base, senior, mid-level Taliban, let's say, he's released to a group of tribal elders, his family, he publicly abjures violence, he signs on and says, I'm going to support the Afghan government. It's very difficult for him to go back on that because so many other people have had to sort of vouch for him. And so that policy is, I think, potentially a very good policy. So we shouldn't just sort of say, well, these are all bad people we shouldn't be negotiating with, because after all, that's exactly the same policy we're doing in Iraq. The sons of Iraq were all shooting at us a year ago. They're now all shooting at Al-Qaeda. So this idea of negotiations is potentially a useful one if it really yields results. And so I think the jury is still out with the Pakistani negotiations. Is it really going to yield foreign fighters, members of Al-Qaeda, people like Bayatullah Masood, or not? And I'm not holding my breath on that one.